Go ahead, Medic 2.
Prince George Medic 2 to Prince George's Central. We'll need a helicopter. Have a 6-year-old black male struck by a car.
22 million children are involved in serious accidents each year. 22 million, or 1 out of every 4.
We'll be transporting to Children's Hospital.
Okay, Medic 2, helicopter will be dispatched 1512.
More children die from trauma or accidental injury than from all other causes combined.
Pedestrian hit by a car. Yeah. Has a fracture of both legs, head injury, superficial lacerations to the back of the head. Is conscious, pupils are equal and reactive.
Each year, nearly 10,000 children lose their lives by accident.
And the kids told me that he had just fallen through the window and he was full of blood.
I looked in the tree and we saw a piece of dynamite.
About 2.5 weeks ago, my wife was leaving the church one night with my 2 kids. Somehow or another, no one will ever know why, she turned onto the wrong 2 lanes of a 4-lane highway. She did not go across far enough. She had a head-on collision. She and my son, 4 years old, were killed instantly.
Then we broke in half and stuff flew open. Then we sat there by the tree and we busted. I mean, we lit it, then it blew up.
I got ran over by a car.
They pulled up and asked me if I had a little girl out on a blue bicycle. And of course I had this sinking feeling and I said I'd check. And sure enough, she was out. We went down to the site and I identified the bike. And of course it was crushed. It had been run over by the dump truck.
I was still on fire.
Oh, you were still on fire when you came inside? He turned the lighter on and then poured the gasoline on it to see if it would explode?
We'll look at what can be done to stop the leading killer of our children.
Has mask trousers on, but only the legs are inflated. Has a BP of 110/86, pulse of 140, and respirations of 24.
I had ran across the street to her, and a car came like this, and went boom.
It is a war. It's a children's war, and it's going on out there every day here in our civilian surroundings.
Nearly 5,000 children are killed in automobiles. Over 1,500 children drown. 1,400 children die of burns. More than 1,200 victims of trauma are under the age of 1.
If we had an infectious disease like polio or in the old days diphtheria that was killing individuals, particularly children, of the proportions that are now being recorded for accidental deaths in childhood, there would be a national hue and an outcry, and we would say something must be done, and there would be something in the paper about it every day.
The number 1 killer of children these days is accidents. There's no question about that. We say at times that it has assumed epidemic proportions, and what that means is that the numbers of children who die in accidents exceeds our normal expectation. That's happening now. The number 1 killer of children in this country for years was infectious disease, as it was all over the world. But we've made such remarkable strides that little by little, the infectious diseases have faded, almost to the point of obscurity in some instances, and now accidents have climbed to be number 1.
Brian, 6 years old, was struck by a car. He was flown by helicopter to Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C., where a specialized pediatric trauma service was ready and waiting. The trauma service is based on the coordinated response of a team of pediatric specialists. Surgeon Bob Connors is the leader of the pediatric trauma team.
I've been in places where they've had a team approach like this, and I've been in places where they haven't. I think the main advantages are that there's been some forethought into the kinds of things that need to be done with these patients, and there's been a plan to getting those things done. And the workload has been divided up between people who are each good at what they're doing. It also very much, I think, cuts down on the amount of chaos that happens during resuscitation. I consider myself in charge of the patient's care and in charge of the team. And they are extensions of me in a way. They have roles to play, roles that are assigned, things to do that need to be done.
His pupils are 4 millimeters equal and reactive. Good capillary refill.
I direct them in a way so that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and I'm responsible for the overall care of the resuscitation.
Brian, how old are you, son? Can you tell me how old you are? How old are you?
This is a shock patient. It's a pedestrian that's been hit by a car.
Brian? You're doing fine, son. You're doing fine. I want you to come here for a second.
I think when you're in charge of a resuscitation, the team is like extra arms and legs.
What were the most recent vital signs? Okay, we want X-ray next.
You don't have to take 5 minutes to do a procedure. You have somebody there that can do it for you. And in that way, it really does free you to look at the patient more carefully and follow things better. The protocol makes it sound stylized, but I think when you have a protocol in place and people know their jobs and they're trained in them and they're used to them, that goes much more smoothly.
Okay, why don't you get this? Come on, get this way.
While the patient is stabilized by the team of specialists in the emergency room, X-ray technicians, pharmacists, blood specialists, and social workers throughout the hospital are also working as part of the team, each with a special role in saving young trauma victims.
All right? Mommy's on her way.
Everybody that works in trauma is used to dealing with patients that can't communicate with you.
10.
But even in the less severely injured children,
His gases are normal.
they can't tell you that
Chris,
it's their
31.
wrist that hurts and not their shoulder. And it's just more difficult to localize things. They won't, or they can't cooperate in telling you how they feel things or what's numb or what's not.
How much, did we get a couple units of blood set up for him?
Makes evaluation of what oftentimes are more minor injuries, and sometimes they're major injuries as well. The neurologic examination in general is much harder to do in a child than it is in an older person.
Brian, this isn't a game. We're not playing.
Squeeze my hand here.
Toes, wiggle your left toes for me, Brian.
107.
He's wiggling his toes down there on the left foot, too.
Yeah.
You were in an accident. Do you remember it at all? You broke your leg, I'm afraid. Okay? You're going to need an operation to get it feeling better. You have to be in the hospital a while, but you're going to be fine. All right? Okay? We just need to do some testing. That's why there's so many doctors around here talking to you. All right? We're going to tap around just to test and make sure that the rest of you is okay. Okay? And then we're probably going to have to put you to sleep for an operation to fix your leg.
Can I just take a look at his face?
Can you get the OR on the phone for me?
What about his head injury? What do you think?
Well, his head injury, he seems to be appropriate. He's answering what we want him to do. He tends to go to sleep, but most of them do when they have a severe trauma.
We have a 6-year-old kid down here, a trauma patient that's going to need an operation by the orthopedist. Do you know where we stand up there?
My name's Jeanette. I'm going to be your nurse, okay? Okay. You're doing just fine. We're going to get your leg fixed up. You know what this thing is?
Dr. Martin Eichelberger is director of the trauma service.
As a young resident dealing with the acute trauma to the family and to the child, it became obvious that everything was chaotic and the children could receive much better care if everybody were willing to contribute their resources and their time to benefit these kids in the long run. Because once the mistakes are made in the early phase, the mortality and the morbidity of the injuries can be lifelong.
Well, the whole business about pediatrics, you know, almost a generation ago was that they were not small adults. And then when pediatric surgery came along, it made it extraordinarily clear that you cannot treat a child as though he were a small adult. Everything about him is different. His emotions, the fact that his family is so concerned, his pharmacology, his physiology, his response to trauma, everything's different, and you have to know what you're doing.
Amy, 11, was involved in a head-on collision. She was flown immediately to the hospital. There, specialists have been called in to conduct a brain scan for possible hemorrhaging.
There are lots of things that are different about kids, several things that can be pitfalls for the uninitiated. The principles of many of them are obvious to people who deal mostly with adults. They know it's different, but they don't know the next step. They know that children breathe much more often and not with as large volumes as adults, but they don't remember, they don't have a feel for how much to pump the bag, how many times. It's a lot of it is, it's not so much that they lack the theory, they just lack the experience.
It looks like she has a lateral wall fracture in her orbit and may account for the pupillary asymmetry. We'll need to see the upper cuts to see whether there's been any hemorrhage on the surface of the brain. It looks like she has a fracture there in the, maybe in the middle fossa there too, doesn't it? We still don't see any hemorrhage in or on the surface of the brain.
No edema? Maybe a fracture of the orbit, but no edema?
Some trauma centers where people are mainly adult surgeons see lots and lots of kids, and they're going to be as good as anybody else. You know, I wouldn't say it has to be a pediatric surgeon, but in effect, it has to be a trauma surgeon that works with kids a lot. And it's not a time to go from one consultant to the next until you find someone that's comfortable with children. It's a time to have the right person right away.
Right now she's in the intensive care unit at Children's Hospital. The one thing we do know about her is that the likelihood is that she's going to progress and do well. Again, I would encourage you not to break any speed limits coming up here because she's stable.
Amy, Mommy's here. Lenny's okay. So is Buddy.
She's got
You're
a
doing
hand over
fine.
there.
Okay.
Something to hold on to.
Mommy's
Yeah.
here.
It's good for them to just feel you, even if you don't know if they're
Mommy's here.
aware of what's going
So's
on.
Daddy. Miss Mary's with Lenny.
Just scares you when you think, oh my God, it's that serious that you need a helicopter, And the other fellow was in a local hospital. We figured, well, he must be okay if they didn't take him too.
It's our responsibility to treat that family as soon as they find out that child is injured, because their well-being is very, very related to the well-being of the child. And once that communication is made and they're indoctrinated and understand what we're trying to accomplish as a team, they become part of our team, they're part of our trauma team, then consequently the child is going to do much better faster.
It's just an IV.
Only that way do we really feel that we've done our job properly in managing the pediatric patient.
Put around and have it pulled out.
Mommy's here. So's Daddy.
Another important part of medical care following trauma is provided by the hospital's social workers, psychologists, and child life specialists. Chris Mayer fulfills one of these very important functions.
I wouldn't mind it.
I see my role as being really unique from other disciplines in the sense that, number one, I don't have to do anything physical to the child. I'm there really to help kids and parents cope with the stresses of being in the hospital, trying to normalize the experience for them. I think, when a child comes into the hospital, they're stripped of everything that they know about. It's a foreign place. They have no choices of anything. People come in the room all the time and are doing invasive things. It really strips a lot of a child's sense of self. What I do is I will go into a room and find out what the child's understanding of what happened to them is.
Well, you know a lot about what they've been doing here to you.
Yeah.
Would you like to sort of know a lot of the information about what's going on to you?
Sometimes kids end up in a unit. They don't even know how they got there. They don't even know where they are. So a lot of just sort of clarifying, like where they are, how they got there, helping them gain a sense of reality, I think, at that point.
The night before the operation, and I'm here watching TV, and St. Elsewhere was on. I'm watching this guy die, and I'm saying, should I be watching this? So I'm watching this guy pass out, and
There's just a marked difference between a child when a parent is around and when a parent is not there. Even if that child is expressing anger toward the parent, in many different ways. I think it's just their way of saying, I need you here with me. And, I think the parent needs to understand that, if, at all costs, that they can be there. That's most important for that child.
Did your tummy feel better? Good. Do you feel better now that your dressings are all done?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so glad. It hurts when we do them, doesn't it? Do you understand why we have to change your dressings? No, we do it because we want your burns to get all better. Just like when you get a cut, we have to wash the cut so it won't get infected, won't get sick. So that's why we do it to your arms. Do you want to play now? We play when burn time's all over with, don't we? Which one's that?
I like that.
Do you like that one too?
You like that one?
Yeah, I like that one.
When you go down the skate park?
Uh-huh.
You think you're about ready to go home? What are you going to do when you go home? Hmm?
Weed the garden.
Weed the garden? Who's going to help you do that?
Papa.
Papa's going to help you do that? Is that right? How are you doing today, Mr. Marcus?
Just fine.
Doing all right?
Yeah.
You about ready to take her home?
I sure am.
Huh?
It'd be great to get her home.
Get everything all set up for it at home? I mean, do you think you'll be able to handle it without too much trouble?
We'll handle something, that's for sure.
You got some family at home to help you out?
Yeah.
Tell me you can't do it. Oh, did I stomp on your foot? I did. I'm sorry.
The day after she got out of intensive care, we told her what had happened to her mother and brother. And I've had a lot of help here, not just from, I mean, she and I both have had a lot of help here, not just from the doctors, of course, the surgeons, the plastic surgeons, and the pediatricians and whatever. I'm not really sure what all their functions are. There's a crowd of them that come around and look at her, I can assure you. But for me, I suppose the people who have worked with me for her also, I'm not sure what her title is, a psychologist maybe, she is here. But she's worked very closely with me and constantly in how to deal with this matter with Tressa. And we've had some rough spots, made a few mistakes, but by and large, it's we've seemed to muggle through it, and we're slowly beginning to pick up the pieces and hoping to get out of here now.
What you've got to do is you've got to be able to bring the resources to bear instantaneously to the patient's bedside so that they can benefit immediately from the care system that you have available. It's not good enough to have a resource at one end of the hospital that's not available within 10 or 15 minutes. And because those 15 or 20 minutes lag time in the care of a pediatric patient can really mean the difference between life and death. And people now have gotten very excited about participating on the trauma team because they see the quality of care has increased. Our emphasis has been on service. And the main thing that we want to accomplish is to give that child, the family, the best service that we can provide in an immediate basis. And that's taken a lot of effort by people that are not surgeons, that are distributed throughout the entire hospital, for them to bring their resources and their capabilities and their talents to bear on the outcome for this family.
The concept of the trauma team doesn't end at the hospital's boundaries. It extends into the community. The paramedics that first arrive on the scene of an accident are a vital link in the chain of health care that can make a life or death difference to young trauma victims.
I think in this country we have one of the finest methods of transporting the injured adult. If you watch one of these demonstrations where the state police go out and cut the top of a car off, the medics put on plaster casting, the patient is lifted out of the crumpled car without even bending his body, and that protects him against injury caused by moving. But when a child is in a car and injured, I've seen medics run over, and I guess out of their emotional concern for the child, they pick him up. And when they pick him up, they bend him. When they bend him, they sometimes take a fractured spine and make a quadriplegic out of a child.
We, I think, have convinced people that they do have an individual role to play. The individual who's doing the typing and crossing of blood is very crucial in the outcome of these children. And you never see that individual. You never see them down here doing the resuscitation. You might see the surgeon, and you might see the critical care doctor, you might see the anesthesiologist, you may see a ton of nurses, but you don't see some of these people that really and truly make the difference. And just the radiology technician, the ability to develop films in a very efficient way really impacts on how these children are cared for. Time is a critical factor. And if these children are not immediately cared for, the probability of death goes up. If the child has to have a secondary transport, meaning if they go from the field to another hospital where 3 or 4 doctors stabilize the patient and then transfer them to a referral center, there are a lot of chances for that child to die because of management problems. Consequently, our concern is to be able to deal immediately with the child once the injury is sustained so that we have a good outcome. And it takes a little bit of effort on people's parts to do that. And once they realize that they can participate and they do have something to contribute, then all of a sudden you have a team that's ready to play the Super Bowl.
They need a trauma center the same as adults need a trauma center. And they need a trauma center that's staffed with people who specialize in the care of children, because it's very different from the care of adults. Where I work, we have recently, last year, we were granted a trauma rating so that we could become a level 1 trauma center. So I'm fairly familiar with how a trauma code is supposed to be run, the things that are supposed to happen. A lot of times they don't happen. So that when we got to children's and it was going exactly as it was supposed to, I was met by the social worker, I was taken immediately to where my child was, I was given complete information, I knew everything, every minute of the way, and it was wonderful. And many people don't understand what the resources are and how to use those kind of facilities. They don't know to ask to take me to a trauma center, or is this the appropriate thing, even to question what's happening to them. Yeah, so I feel very lucky.
We cannot entrust the well-being of our children to luck. Only a national system of specialized pediatric trauma care will ensure that our children will have the care they deserve and need. Only a concerted effort to enhance emergency care and emphasize prevention will curb the growing number of fatal accidents that occur each year. There is a great deal we can and must do to stop this epidemic of childhood injury and death. The way to prevent children from dying from accidents is to prevent the accidents. Prevention, although effective and cheap, is unfortunately very non-glamorous.
If you had a new operation for a child who was injured, it would take hold immediately. But to get parents, grandparents, school teachers, community to instruct children on how to prevent accidents, that's much more difficult, and it takes longer to see the effects.
Until such time as we've gotten a good handle on the environmental causes of trauma, we've got to be prepared for these accident victims, particularly these children who are with us across the nation. That means regionalization of care. That means tertiary care centers where a victim can be brought quickly and then the right things happen instantly.
You know, parents are on the front line, and I think they have to sort of walk a tightrope between having their children so concerned about accident prevention that they don't have any fun anymore, but on the other hand, teaching them what things make sense to do and what things make sense not to do.
What have you learned?
I learned not to play with matches and dynamite.
Right, because it's very dangerous, right?
I can't walk.
You won. Were you leaning against another window?
If there's a lot of cars come past, I go get somebody and tell them, because it be a busy street. If it's a lazy street, I go cross over myself. Look both ways.
The other kids should not play with matches or lighters or nothing that blow up.
And don't talk to strangers, because they will hurt you. But don't play with fire. Don't never get money from strangers or candy. Don't go nowhere with strangers.
Not a bad bit of rescuing, huh?
That doesn't sound too hard.
Be careful when you're in the street. You could end up in a hospital like I am now. You be careful out there.
This year, nearly 10,000 children will lose their lives by accident. 10,000 senseless deaths. Better prevention and improved trauma care could save 9,000 of those children. Make sure you know where your child should be taken and how he or she will get there in the event of a serious accident. Ask your doctor or a local hospital. It's time we joined our children in their war. With our help, they can win.
Leslie, this is code room 2. This is our major code room. We have 2 of them. This is the one that we prefer to use. And what I'd like to do now is acquaint you with all the equipment here in the code room. Leslie, it's very important that you familiarize yourself with all of the equipment that we have in here and its location. The reason for that is that when you're in an actual code situation, emotions run a little bit high and people seem to get a little nervous, and it's very easy to forget where things are.
I have a 9-year-old male here we found over the 2000 block. We got a call for an injury.
How do you feel about taking care of kids in the field?
I love it.
But I think the satisfaction comes from seeing those people, whether they're normal or whether they're alive with some disability, seeing them heal, seeing them come back and grow and live a normal life, or live a life that might have been snuffed out if you hadn't been able to help them.